Perhaps it's timely to revisit one of the great stories of Rumi, that great Sufi. It's the story of that king of Kabul. He was an adherent of the Sufi way, and every experience of his life he contemplated to trammel its depths in an endeavor to find its essence. But one night, the king of Kabul lay down to sleep and had a dream that his only and beloved son, Tariq, died a dreadful and untimely death. The king woke up in a great state of anxiety and panic. And instead of resorting to contemplate the depths of this dream, the meaning of death, the emotions related to his son were so great that his mind ran rampant. If my son doesn't have a son, then my kingdom will be destroyed. And so his thoughts went on, and he began to plan a marriage for his son so that there would be a possibility that there would be heirs to keep his kingdom going. So he sent out messengers to seek for a suitable bride. He did not want one of those arrogant and pampered princesses from other kingdoms. He was seeking a maiden who had qualities. And so it was found the daughter of a great sage living on the outskirts of his kingdom, a maiden who was filled with grace and depth. And so the betrothal was made and the marriage was planned. But at this time, in the kingdom, there was an old crone. Alaya was her name, 90 years old. She had never married, but in her life she had had many, many lovers and experienced love in its many forms, but never been fulfilled, never known true love or an absence of loneliness. So at 90 years old, with a longing for companionship and desire still flooding her being, she propped up her sagging breasts. She painted her face with rouge and her eyes with black coal. She had even heard, although she had no spiritual bent, that the holy book had power to bring immortality. So she tore out pieces of it and pasted them on her face and on her body. But the object of her desire was Prince Tariq. Each time he passed on his horse, she would stand outside her door, draping her sari seductively in the hope that he would notice her. But Prince Tariq, following in his father's footsteps, remained steadfast and present and took no heed of the old crone standing on the roadside at her door. But Alaya was desperate. So she even invoked Iblis, Satan himself, to restore her beauty, to fulfill her desires. She harassed him, harangued him, begging, to the point that even Satan himself said, "Why don't you become spiritual and look for the depth of love in your heart instead of through desire?" But she did not relent until finally Satan himself gave her a powder which, when sprinkled on anyone, would make everything desirable. So it came the day when Prince Tariq was to ride off to his bride. So his mind was on the wonder of the possibilities that awaited him in the way of marriage. And so, when he passed the old crone's door, and she threw the powder upon him, he was receptive to its seduction. And turning, he saw her, and in that instant she appeared to him like the most beautiful, youthful, and desired thing he had ever seen. He alighted from his horse and followed her into her house, and there he became her love slave, seeing her as the most desirable and adorable thing that he had ever known. When he did not arrive at the home of his betrothed, the king wondered, as did his fiancée, what had happened. And then, of course, it came to the ears of the king, and he was bereft. What to do? He called on all the sorcerers, all the shamans, everyone who he thought would be able to break the spell that bound his beloved son. But to no avail. Tariq would not listen, nor heed anyone who came to try to bring him out of the arms of the one that appeared to him as being the fulfillment of all desire. 1 year passed, and the beautiful maiden waited and wondered whether indeed he would ever find his way to her door, and the king's kingdom began to decline because he was in such a state that he could think of nothing else but what had beset his son. But then, one day, suddenly, realization came to the king of Kabul that all his thoughts and endeavors had been pointed at what was itself a desire, a continuum, and he realized that he had diverted from his path. He was greatly repentant and went back to his contemplation, seeking the meaning of death. And in his contemplation came the great realization of the transience, the transient nature of life itself. And he surrendered, deeply, deeply surrendered to that which is greater than life itself. And in that moment, in the distance, a great light came towards the king. And when it arrived in his presence, it was in the form of a grand celestial sorcerer. This sorcerer, who had the ability to take on Satan himself. The story of how this great sorcerer won over and broke the spell is the stuff of another story. But the spell was broken. Suddenly, Tariq woke up, and lying beside him was the ancient body of the old crone. In a moment, a wave of repulsion rode over him, followed by a great wave of compassion. But he rose up and left her, and returning to his father's palace, he took with him a sword and a shroud, and kneeling in front of his father, the king, he handed him the sword and said, "Please, kill me. I have erred." But with tears rolling down his face, the king lifted his son to his feet and said, "No, it is not you who have erred, but I." His son Tariq said, "I have been seduced by the witch of Kabul." And his father said, "No, it is life that is the witch of Kabul, and we have both been seduced by life." What is the deep, timely meaning of this story for us at this time? Could we dare ask ourselves, what is our seduction? What is it that draws us or attempts to draw us away from the intensity of the moment where all things are in alignment, all things are connected, all things, all movement is absent in the intense presence, stillness of now. What is our seduction? Why is this story so timely for us. Thank you, thank you.